The Golden Sunset Care Center, a place meant for dignity in twilight years, instead harbored a predator. Patricia Hoffman, its director, a woman with a chilling smile and eyes devoid of compassion, was systematically starving World War II veterans to death. But that grim day she made a monumental miscalculation. She picked the absolute wrong moment to strike a 94-year-old Marine, a man who had stared down bullets and bombs, right in front of 15 roaring members of the Hells Angels. Tommy Miller, a man built like a brick wall and bearing the club's infamous patch, was visiting his Uncle Walter when the sharp, sickening sound of a slap cracked through the sterile silence of the hallway. It echoed, a brutal intrusion on the quiet hum of the care center, and instantly sent a surge of cold dread through Tommy. He spun, his boots thudding against the linoleum as he ran towards the sound, his heart pounding a furious rhythm. Around the bend, the scene crystallized into a horrifying tableau. Patricia Hoffman, immaculate in her expensive designer suit, stood over a frail, elderly figure crumpled on the floor. It was Uncle Walter, his venerable face contorted in pain, a fresh cut bleeding just above his trembling lip. His hand, gnarled by age but still capable of holding a rifle, reached feebly for his fallen walker, a symbol of his dwindling independence. "You filthy old bastard," Patricia shrieked, her voice shrill with venom, completely abandoning any pretense of professional calm. "How dare you accuse me of stealing? You are stealing." Walter, gasping for breath, tried to articulate the truth, his voice barely a whisper. "The food money, the medication funds, all of it." Just as Tommy knelt, his powerful hands gently helping his uncle to his feet, a silent, formidable presence filled the doorway behind them. 14 other Hells Angels, men whose very appearance commanded respect, and often fear, now stood shoulder to shoulder, their leather vests an impenetrable wall, their gazes fixed on the scene. They had been visiting another hero, a veteran further down the hall, their usual boisterous laughter now replaced by an ominous stillness. "What in the hell is going on here?" Tommy demanded, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that promised swift retribution. Patricia, her face momentarily paling, quickly recovered, straightening her perfectly tailored suit with an air of practiced disdain. "Mr. Miller simply had a fall, and now he's making wild, baseless accusations." "I didn't fall," Walter protested, his voice raspy but firm. He clung to Tommy's arm, his eyes, though clouded with age, burning with indignation. She hit me because I found out what she's doing to us." It was then, as Tommy helped his uncle lean against the wall, that he noticed something truly horrifying, a detail that stole his breath. Uncle Walt, a man who had always been sturdy, though aged, had visibly wasted away. He looked gaunt, hollow-eyed, as if he'd shrunk within his own skin. At least 30 pounds, perhaps more, had vanished since Tommy's visit last month. A cold, hard knot formed in Tommy's gut. "Uncle Walt," he asked, his voice tight with controlled fury, "when did you last eat a proper meal?" Walter's eyes, usually sparkling with the wisdom of a long life, filled with tears that tracked slow, painful paths down his cheek. "They give us 1 meal a day now, son. Sometimes just crackers and water." A collective, palpable tension filled the hallway. Every single biker, a legion of men renowned for their explosive tempers and fierce loyalty, tensed, their shoulders squared, their hands clenched, becoming still, dangerous forms, like coiled rattlesnakes ready to strike. "That's just the dementia talking, gentlemen," Patricia interjected quickly. A forced, brittle smile plastered on her face. "We serve 3 full, nutritious meals daily here at Golden Sunset. Standard procedure." Hammer, the imposing president of the Hells Angels, a man whose presence could fill a room and whose words carried an undeniable weight, stepped forward. His voice was calm, almost deceptively so. "Then you won't mind if we take a little tour of your kitchen, Director Hoffman, just to verify." "You can't do that," Patricia protested, her voice rising in panic. "This is private property. You have no right to just barge in." "Call the cops then," Hammer suggested, his smile a thin, chilling line that didn't reach his eyes. "Let's get this whole situation on record. Every single word, every accusation, every lie." Patricia's face went utterly pale, the last vestiges of her composure crumbling, but she desperately tried to maintain some semblance of authority. "Everyone out. I will call security myself if you don't leave this instant." But before she could even reach for her phone, a weak, reedy voice, barely above a whisper, drifted from an open doorway just down the hall. Please help us." That was all it took. With a unified, unstoppable surge, the bikers pushed past Patricia, who stumbled backward, forgotten. What they found inside was beyond comprehension, a nightmare made real. In every room horrors unfolded. Veterans, once formidable heroes who had stormed the blood-soaked beaches of Normandy, who had liberated concentration camps, who had fought and bled for freedom, now lay in soiled beds, their bodies skeletal, their eyes sunken, clinging to life by the barest thread. The air was thick with the smell of neglect, of disease, of despair. "She's been stealing everything," whispered James Chan, a 92-year-old Navy veteran, his voice a fragile rasp, his skin parchment thin over his bones. "Selling our medications on the black market, pocketing our food budget, even our personal belongings, things we brought from home." Tommy's blood ran cold. He rushed into his uncle's room, a place that should have been a sanctuary. On the wall where Walter's meticulously arranged collection of war medals usually hung, there was only a dusty, empty space. His grandfather's cherished pocket watch, a family heirloom, was gone. Even the faded, precious photographs of Walter's fallen brothers in arms, comrades who had paid the ultimate price, were missing, likely sold for a pittance. "Where are his things, Patricia?" Tommy asked, his voice low and laced with a terrifying calm that was far more dangerous than an outright shout. He turned back, his eyes locked on the director, who now stood frozen in the hallway, cornered. "Misplaced probably," she stammered nervously, her earlier defiance completely evaporated. "Dementia patients, they tend to hide things, you know. It's common." The lie hung heavy in the air, a flimsy veil over her monstrous deeds. If you believe that true heroes come in all forms, and that justice should prevail, click the like and subscribe button to show us your unwavering support. It was then that Walter, his hand still trembling, reached into his tattered bathrobe pocket and pulled out his phone. The device looked impossibly modern in his weathered hand, a stark contrast to the ancient horrors he had just escaped. "I'm not demented," he stated, his voice now gaining a surprising strength. "And I recorded everything." He held it up, his finger pressing play. The phone contained weeks of damning evidence. Videos of Patricia brazenly taking cash payments from grieving families, audio recordings of her instructing staff to drastically cut meals, chilling footage of her loading veterans' cherished belongings into the spacious trunk of her sleek Mercedes. "You old fool," Patricia shrieked, the last shred of her carefully constructed facade crumbling into a furious, animalistic rage. She lunged at Walter, her hand reaching for the phone, her eyes wild with panic. But Tommy was faster. His hand shot out, clamping around her wrist with an iron grip. He squeezed, hard, applying just enough pressure to make her gasp, to feel the bones grind beneath his fingers, until her knees buckled, and she dropped to the floor whimpering. Touch him again, Tommy warned, his voice a lethal whisper that promised agony. And you'll need a nursing home yourself. I'll have you arrested for assault, Patricia screamed, clutching her throbbing wrist, tears of pain and fury streaming down her face. Please do, Hammer said, his own phone now raised, recording every second of Patricia's breakdown, her pathetic threats. Let's get the police here right now. We have plenty to show them. Patricia, seeing her meticulously constructed empire of lies collapsing around her, tried to bolt, to escape the tightening circle of angry bikers. But three hulking figures moved as one, blocking her path, their faces grim, immovable. Sit down, Tommy commanded, his voice cold and unwavering. We're having a conversation, and you're not going anywhere. While they waited for the police, the awful truth poured out. The veterans, once too scared or too frail to speak, now, with the Hell's Angels standing guard, found their voices. Patricia Hoffman had been orchestrating this horrifying scheme for 2 years. She cut meals to 1 meager serving per day, sometimes less. She watered down essential medications, essentially denying life-saving treatment. Her twisted logic was to let veterans die faster, to free up beds for new, unsuspecting victims, new streams of stolen money. 27, James whispered, his voice trembling. 27 of our friends. They died because of her. We tried to report it, but she always said nobody would ever believe senile old men. She made us feel like we were crazy. The bikers, their faces etched with disbelief and rage, swept through the facility. The kitchen, supposedly serving 3 full meals a day, was nearly empty. 3 bags of stale white bread and a jar of peanut butter were all that remained to feed 48 veterans. In stark, sickening contrast, Patricia's office told a very different story. Designer handbags lay scattered, half-empty bottles of expensive whiskey glinted on her desk, and bank statements, brazenly left open, revealed she had stolen over $2 million meant for the very heroes she was systematically murdering. That money? Tommy growled, his fists clenching. That money was meant for these heroes, for their care, for their comfort. Patricia, ever the manipulator, tried one last desperate gambit, her voice regaining a chillingly detached composure. They're dying anyway, she shrugged, a grotesque parody of indifference. So what difference does it really make? The room went utterly silent. A deadly, suffocating silence descended, heavier than any biker's roar. The air grew thick with unspoken fury. What difference? Hammer finally asked, his voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the silence like a razor. His eyes, usually dancing with a mischievous glint, were now as cold and hard as steel. These men saved the world, and you're asking what difference? He pulled out his phone, his thumb flying across the screen, and made a single powerful call. Brothers, he said, his voice now booming with authority. We need everyone, every single one of us, at Golden Sunset. Now, within the hour, the quiet suburban street outside Golden Sunset Care Center transformed into a thunderous spectacle. Over 200 bikers, not just the Hell's Angels but members from every club that boasted veteran members, descended upon the facility like a protective legion. Chrome gleamed, engines rumbled, and a sea of leather and denim surrounded the nursing home. When the local police, led by Detective Morrison, finally arrived, they found Patricia Hoffman, pale and trembling, completely encircled by a silent, seething phalanx of angry bikers and 48 frail but determined veterans, all ready to tell their stories. She's been murdering them slowly, Detective, Tommy explained, his voice flat with outrage, pointing at the skeletal figures. This isn't neglect. This is serial killing for profit. Patricia, despite the overwhelming evidence, managed a nervous, high-pitched laugh. You can't prove murder, she scoffed, still trying to cling to her twisted logic. When they're already dying of old age, but the universe, it seemed, was conspiring against her. Just then, Dr. Sarah Kim arrived, a brilliant geriatric specialist who had, for months, harbored deep suspicions about the abnormally high death rate at Golden Sunset. She had been quietly investigating, pulling strings, and gathering her own evidence. I've examined the records, Dr. Kim announced, her voice clear and authoritative, cutting through the tension. She held up a stack of meticulously organized documents. These men were deliberately malnourished and denied their essential medications. This isn't just elder abuse. This is murder, pure and simple. Patricia Hoffman was arrested on the spot, facing 48 counts of elder abuse and 27 counts of negligent homicide. But the bikers weren't finished. Not by a long shot. They immediately contacted every news station, every local and national paper. By evening, Patricia's smug, terrified face was plastered across every screen, every headline. Nursing home director stars World War II veterans, screamed the broadcasts, turning her into a national pariah overnight. Her high-powered lawyer managed to secure her bail the very next morning. Patricia, believing herself safe, perhaps even untouchable, walked out of jail with a smirk. She was wrong, terribly, catastrophically wrong. She found her meticulously manicured house surrounded by a silent, menacing ring of motorcycles. Legal, peaceful, terrifying. These weren't just the Hell's Angels. It was a vast, silent brotherhood. Every day bikers followed her. To court, where their silent vigil filled the hallways. To the grocery store, where their intimidating presence ensured she was a pariah. Everywhere she went, there they were, always filming, always watching, a constant, chilling reminder of her crimes. She tried to flee town. They followed. She tried to hide at her sister's house in another state. They found her, appearing as if by magic. This is harassment. Her lawyer fumed to the judge, waving his arms in exasperation. They are terrorizing my client. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman, merely raised an eyebrow. They are on public property, counselor. And in this country people have a First Amendment right to protest, legally and peacefully. Then the floodgates truly opened. More damning evidence surfaced. Patricia, it turned out, was a serial abuser. She had executed the exact same scheme at 2 previous nursing homes, in different states, leaving behind a trail of dozens more dead veterans. The FBI got involved. Federal charges piled up like stones on a grave, and Patricia's bail was swiftly revoked. At her trial, the courtroom was packed. Nearing 100 years old, heroes of the greatest generation, now fragile and gaunt, testified from their wheelchairs. Some were so weak they could barely speak, their voices cracking, but they spoke anyway, their words carrying the immense weight of their suffering. Walter Miller, Tommy's uncle, delivered the most powerful testimony of all. I survived Normandy, he said, his voice surprisingly strong, resonating through the hushed courtroom. His eyes, though old, held the fierce glint of a warrior who had seen humanity's darkest depths. I survived the freezing hell of the Battle of the Bulge. I thought I would die peacefully in America, the country I fought for, surrounded by people who honored my service. Instead, this woman, this monster, she tortured us for money. He turned, his gaze fixing on Patricia, who cowered behind her lawyers. You're worse than the Nazis, Walter declared, his voice filled with a righteous fury that silenced the room. Because at least they were honest enemies. You were just a thief in a suit stealing the lives of old men. Patricia Hoffman was sentenced to life without parole. In prison, word of her atrocities spread like wildfire. She lasted precisely 1 week in general population before an inmate, whose own grandfather had died, neglected and starving at Golden Sunset, found Patricia alone in the laundry room. Patricia survived the brutal beating, but the injuries were severe enough that she required a feeding tube for 6 months. Poetic justice, the bikers called it, a grim smile on their faces. The Hells Angels, true to their unique code of honor, didn't just walk away. They temporarily took over Golden Sunset Care Center. They personally delivered mountains of nourishing food, hired new, compassionate staff, and ensured that every single veteran was cared for with the dignity and respect they deserved. Tommy's uncle Walter slowly, steadily, gained back his lost weight, his spark returning. His stolen medals were tracked down to a pawn shop and reverently returned to his room. His grandfather's cherished watch was recovered from Patricia's safety deposit box, a final piece of her ill-gotten gains reclaimed. The bikers established a permanent, visible presence. Every day, club members visited, bringing meals, meticulously checking on the quality of care, and making an unspoken promise. Nobody would ever hurt these heroes again. If you find yourself moved by tales of unexpected justice and unbreakable bonds, check out the link in the first comment for more extraordinary biker stories. The news of the Golden Sunset takeover and the subsequent arrest sent a tremor of fear through every other nursing home in the state. Good. The bikers, relentless in their newfound mission, began systematically checking them all. Their efforts bore fruit. They found 3 more facilities where veterans were being starved and neglected. 3 more directors were arrested, and hundreds more heroes were saved from the silent, insidious torment. Walter Miller lived 2 more years after Patricia's arrest. They were good years, dignified years, filled with the warmth of genuine care and the camaraderie of his new, unlikely protectors. At his funeral, over 300 bikers, a somber, respectful legion, carried his casket. He had earned the Bronze Star at Normandy, a testament to his courage in war. But he often told Tommy that his greatest victory wasn't on the battlefield, but in exposing Patricia Hoffman. His last words to Tommy, whispered with a faint smile, were, "We fought evil overseas so you wouldn't have to fight it here, son. But evil found us anyway. Thank you for finishing our war." The Golden Sunset Care Center now thrives under new, compassionate management. Its walls are adorned not with sterile decor, but with photos of the veterans who suffered and died under Patricia's cruel reign. Not to remember her evil, but to remember them, heroes who survived global warfare only to be slowly murdered by an insatiable greed. Patricia Hoffman sits in her prison cell, a shadow of her former arrogant self. Some days, she's fed through a tube, a stark reminder of her crimes. When other inmates manage to poison her food, she lives under constant suicide watch, a cruel irony, forced to endure the very existence she inflicted upon others. Every Memorial Day, a package arrives in her cell, always identical. Glossy photos of all the veterans she killed. Young men in crisp uniforms, full of life, heading off to war. The message, printed on a small card, is always the same. Asterisk, they survived Hitler. They didn't survive you. Asterisk, she will die in that cell someday. Alone, unforgiven, forgotten. But the veterans she starved are remembered. Their names are etched onto a beautiful memorial outside Golden Sunset, beneath an eternal flame. Fresh flowers appear daily, placed by bikers who refuse to let their memory fade. The memorial plaque reads, with solemn reverence, "They deserved better. We failed them once. Never again." Below that, in smaller, resolute text, it adds, "Protected forever by the Hells Angels." Because that's what real brotherhood does. Protects those who protected us all. Even if it means destroying someone who thought old veterans were too weak to fight back. Patricia Hoffman learned the hard way. Veterans never stop being warriors. They just recruit younger warriors to fight beside them. And sometimes those warriors wear leather, ride Harleys, and show no mercy to those who torture heroes. No mercy at all.